The holding cell at Rikers Island smelled like disinfectant and fear. Detective Sarah Chen pressed her badge against the reinforced glass, waiting for the guard to buzz her through. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March 2019, and she'd been pulled from her bed by a phone call that made her blood run cold. "We've got a situation in C Block," Captain Rodriguez had said, his voice tight. 3 inmates dead. Same method. Same timeline. And Chen, they all ate from the commissary. Now, standing in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the prison's administrative wing, Sarah stared at the security footage timestamp, 11:34 p.m. The timestamp when everything went wrong. The prison food conspiracy had been an urban legend for decades. Inmates whispered about it in every facility from California to New York. The story went like this: certain meals were poisoned, not to kill, but to control. To make prisoners docile, compliant, easier to manage. It was dismissed as paranoid fantasy, the kind of mythology that grew in places where men had nothing but time and imagination. But 3 bodies in the infirmary suggested something far worse than legend. Sarah followed Warden Marcus Thompson down a corridor lined with steel doors. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with gray creeping through his temples and deep lines etched around his eyes. 23 years he'd run this facility, and she'd never seen him look rattled. Until tonight. The first one was Darius Williams, Thompson said, his keys jangling against his belt. Found him seizing in his cell at 11:47 p.m. By the time medical got to him, he was gone. Foam at the mouth, eyes rolled back. "We thought it was an overdose." And the others? Miguel Santos, 12 minutes later. Then James, Trigger, Morrison at 12:03 a.m. Different cell blocks. No connection between them except... He stopped at a heavy door marked evidence storage. Except what? Thompson pulled out a sealed plastic bag. Inside were 3 identical trays, the kind used in the commissary. Each contained remnants of the same meal: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, a slice of white bread. Except they all ate dinner from batch 7C, prepared between 4 o'clock and 5:30 p.m. yesterday afternoon. Sarah's mind raced. How many inmates ate from that batch? 247. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. How many are showing symptoms? Thompson's jaw tightened. As of 10 minutes ago? 63 and climbing. We've got the medical wing overflowing, and I've called in every available doctor within 50 miles. But Chin, here's what's keeping me up. The CDC preliminary came back 20 minutes ago. He handed her a tablet. The toxicology report made her skin crawl. "Ricin," she whispered. "Trace amounts. Enough to kill, but not immediately." Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The dose was calculated to trigger symptoms hours after consumption, long after any connection to the food could be made. Sarah's training kicked in. Ricin was one of the deadliest naturally occurring poisons known to man. Made from castor beans, it had no antidote. A few grains, smaller than a grain of salt, could kill an adult. And someone had weaponized it inside a maximum security prison. Who has access to the kitchen? That's the thing, Thompson said, and now she saw real fear in his eyes. "We run a tight ship. Every employee is vetted, background checked, monitored. The kitchen staff has been here for years. Model employees, every one of them." "Then how?" "I don't know. But there's something else." He led her to a monitoring station where a guard sat reviewing footage. The screens showed multiple angles of the prison kitchen: industrial stoves, prep stations, storage areas, the commissary line where inmates received their meals. "Show her," Thompson ordered. The guard rewound the footage to 4:17 p.m. The timestamp in the corner marked yesterday afternoon. Sarah watched kitchen workers moving through their routines, chopping vegetables, stirring massive pots, loading trays onto metal carts. Then she saw it. A figure in kitchen whites, face partially obscured by a surgical mask and hairnet, moved to a preparation station. Their movements were subtle, practiced. They worked alone for exactly 47 seconds, adding something from a small container to one of the industrial-sized meatloaf pans. "Can you enhance the face?" Sarah asked. The guard tried, But the angle was wrong, the image too grainy. "We've been through every frame," Thompson said. That person knew where the cameras were, how to avoid them. Professional-level counter-surveillance. ID badge. Conveniently turned inward. We can't see it. Sarah felt the case expanding in her mind, threads connecting in ways she didn't like. Pull the employee roster for that shift. I want to interview every single person who was in that kitchen. Already done. We've got them isolated in separate interview rooms. But Chen, there's one more thing you need to see. Thompson pulled up another screen, this one showing the interior of a cell. The image was frozen on a close-up of a wall. Scratched into the concrete, barely visible, were words that made Sarah's stomach drop. "The food is the message." Darius Williams' cell, Thompson explained. "He carved that 3 days ago. We thought it was just more prison paranoia. But now..." Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from the CDC liaison confirmed ricin poisoning. Batch contamination deliberate. Preparing mass casualty protocols. She looked at Thompson. "We need to lock down this entire facility. Nobody eats, nobody drinks, nothing moves until we figure out how this happened." Already in progress. "And I need the personnel files for every employee who's worked in that kitchen in the last 6 months. Someone on your staff is either the killer, or they let the killer in." Thompson nodded, but his expression was grim. "There's over 100 people with kitchen access. Guards, contractors, inspectors, delivery drivers, the chaplain who does meal blessings. Start with anyone who's had recent behavioral changes. Financial problems, personal crises, anything that could make them vulnerable to outside influence." Because Sarah knew, with the cold certainty that came from 15 years working homicide, that this wasn't random violence. This was calculated, precise, and deeply personal. Someone wanted these specific men dead, and they'd used the prison's own food supply as their weapon. The question was why. As she headed toward the interview rooms, Sarah's mind cataloged the facts. 3 dead, 63 sick, and a poison that required sophisticated knowledge to manufacture and deploy. This wasn't a simple revenge killing or a gang hit. This was something bigger. She passed a window overlooking the main yard. Beyond the razor wire, New York City glittered in the darkness, oblivious to the crisis unfolding inside these walls. Her phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from her partner, Detective Marcus Webb, medical examiner, found something. "You need to see this now." Sarah broke into a run, her footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. She burst into the medical wing, where Webb stood outside the autopsy suite, his face pale. "What is it?" He held up an evidence bag. Inside was a small piece of paper, no bigger than a fortune from a cookie. It had been found in Darius Williams' stomach, partially dissolved but still readable. The message was typed in tiny print. "You knew what you did. This is justice." Sarah's blood turned to ice. The others? Same. Each victim had one in their stomach. They were hidden inside the meatloaf. This changed everything. The killer hadn't just poisoned random inmates. They'd specifically targeted Williams, Santos, and Morrison. And they'd left messages, ensuring their victims knew, in their final moments, exactly why they were dying. "Pull everything on these 3, Sarah ordered. Criminal history, known associates, any overlap in their cases. There's a connection we're missing." But when they opened the locked file room to access the records, what they found changed everything. The filing cabinet designated for Williams, Santos, and Morrison was empty. Every document, every arrest record, every case file, gone. And on the empty shelf, written in red marker, were 2 words that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "Ask Blackwood." The name Blackwood hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd heard it whispered in precinct hallways, seen it redacted in case files that came down from internal affairs with classifications she didn't have clearance to read. Detective Raymond Blackwood had been a legend in the NYPD, 30 years on the force, hundreds of collars, a clearance rate that made him untouchable. Until 2015, when he'd vanished from the department overnight. No retirement party, no farewell. Just gone. The official story was early retirement. The whispered version was something darker. Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed Captain Rodriguez. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me about Blackwood," she said without preamble. The silence on the other end stretched too long. "Captain? Where did you hear that name?" His voice had changed, gone cold and careful. "It's connected to the Rikers case. 3 dead inmates, all poisoned, and someone wants me to ask about Blackwood. So I'm asking." Another pause. Then, "Come to the precinct. Not over the phone. And Chen? Don't mention that name to anyone else until we talk." The line went dead. Sarah stood in the prison file room, her instincts screaming. She turned to Webb, who'd been watching her with growing concern. "Get forensics on these files," she said. "I want to know when they were removed and by who. Check security footage, sign-in logs, everything. Someone walked out of here with evidence from a triple homicide, and they did it recently. Where are you going?" "To find out what we're really dealing with." The drive from Rikers to the precinct took 23 minutes through pre-dawn traffic. Sarah used every second to dig into her phone, searching for any public record of Raymond Blackwood. What she found was disturbingly sparse. A few commendations from the early 2000s, a handful of newspaper mentions about major cases he'd closed. Then nothing after March 2015. It was as if he'd been erased. Captain Rodriguez was waiting in his office, door closed, blinds drawn. He looked like he'd aged a decade since their phone call. On his desk sat a thick manila folder, its edges worn from handling. "Sit down," he said. Sarah sat. "What is this?" "Insurance," Rodriguez said quietly. "Something I kept when I was told to forget it ever existed." He pushed the folder toward her. Raymond Blackwood ran a task force from 2010 to 2015. Off the books, funded through seized asset accounts that nobody tracked too carefully. The mission was simple: target the worst of the worst, the criminals who'd corrupted the system so thoroughly that traditional prosecution was impossible. "A hit squad," Sarah said flatly. "No, nothing that clean." Rodriguez opened the folder. Inside were photographs, surveillance shots, financial records. They built cases the right way. Solid evidence, ironclad chains of custody. But somewhere along the way, the mission changed. Blackwood started seeing patterns nobody else could see or wanted to see. Corruption that went all the way up. Judges taking bribes. Prosecutors throwing cases. Evidence disappearing from lockup. Sarah scanned the documents. Names jumped out at her, familiar from headlines. Mob figures who'd walked on technicalities, white-collar criminals who'd gotten suspended sentences for stealing millions, violent offenders released early on overcrowding exceptions. "He was building a conspiracy theory," she said. "That's what Internal Affairs concluded. Paranoid delusions, they called it. But Blackwood had details. Specific transactions, specific case numbers, specific people." Rodriguez tapped one of the photos. "Including 3 men who all went through the system in 2014. Men who should have gotten life sentences but walked with time served or suspended sentences." Sarah's breath caught. She knew what was coming. Rodriguez laid out 3 police photos side by side. Darius Williams, Miguel Santos, James Morrison, all arrested by Blackwood's task force. All prosecuted in 2014. All mysteriously got plea deals that put them back on the street within 18 months. What were they charged with? Williams was running a human trafficking operation out of a warehouse in Queens. "We pulled 14 girls out of there, all underage, most from overseas. The case was airtight. Then the evidence got contaminated, the search warrant was ruled invalid on a technicality, and Williams walked with 5 years for labor violations." Sarah felt sick. Santos was moving fentanyl by the kilo. His distribution network was responsible for at least 47 overdose deaths that we could prove. Should have been multiple life sentences. Instead, his lawyer convinced a judge the seizure was improper. He served 22 months. And Morrison? Rodriguez's face hardened. Trigger Morrison was an enforcer for the Galante crime family. Suspected in at least a dozen murders, but we could never make anything stick because witnesses kept disappearing or recanting. Then Blackwood's team caught him red-handed dumping a body in the East River. Surveillance footage, DNA evidence, The victim's blood all over Morrison's car. Open and shut. Let me guess, he walked too. 18 months for obstruction of justice. The murder charge vanished. Evidence went missing. The prosecutor on the case suddenly retired and moved to Florida. Sarah stared at the photos of the 3 dead inmates. Blackwood thought someone was protecting them. He knew someone was. He spent months trying to prove it, following the money, tracking the connections. And then one night in March 2015, he came to me with everything he'd found. Rodriguez's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He'd traced it back to a single source. A person with enough power to manipulate cases across multiple jurisdictions, enough connections to make evidence disappear, enough money to buy whoever they needed. Who? Rodriguez hesitated, and in that moment Sarah saw real fear. Judge Margaret Corrigan. Superior Court. Now sitting on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. The implications crashed over Sarah like a wave. A federal judge. Not just any judge, but one of the most respected legal minds in New York, a woman being mentioned for a Supreme Court nomination. You're telling me a federal judge orchestrated the release of human traffickers, drug dealers, and murderers? I'm telling you that's what Blackwood believed. And 2 days after he showed me his evidence, he disappeared. His files were confiscated by Internal Affairs, his team was disbanded, and everyone who worked with him was reassigned or encouraged to take early retirement. I was given a very clear message: forget Raymond Blackwood ever existed, or my career was over. Why didn't you come forward? Rodriguez's laugh was bitter. With what? Blackwood's evidence disappeared. Every document, every recording, every piece of proof he'd gathered, gone. The only thing I managed to keep was this file, and even that's just fragments. Without Blackwood himself to testify, without the physical evidence, it was my word against a federal judge. How do you think that would have played out? Sarah's mind raced through the implications. So someone poisoned these 3 inmates because they were loose ends. Men who should have been locked away for life but got released through corruption. Someone's tying up loose ends. Or someone's sending a message, Rodriguez countered. Think about the method. Ricin in prison food, delivered through the very system that failed to keep these men incarcerated. And those notes in their stomachs, you knew what you did. That's not a professional hit. That's personal. You think it's Blackwood. I think he's the only person with motive, means, and the expertise to pull this off. He knew these cases inside and out. He knew the prison system. And he had 4 years to plan his revenge. Sarah stood, pacing the small office. We need to find him. I've been trying for 4 years. Raymond Blackwood doesn't exist anymore. No credit cards, no bank accounts, no digital footprint. If he's alive, he's completely off the grid. Her phone buzzed. A text from Webb. Medical wing situation critical. Death toll now at 8. Contamination spreading. And Chen, we found something in the kitchen. Sarah was already moving toward the door when Rodriguez called after her. Chen, if you're going after Blackwood, you need to know something else. He pulled out one final photograph from his desk drawer. It showed a younger Blackwood, still in uniform, standing next to a teenage girl with the same sharp eyes and determined jaw. He had a daughter, Emily Blackwood. She was 17 when he disappeared. Smart kid, full scholarship to Columbia. Where is she now? That's the thing. 6 months after her father vanished, she dropped out. Changed her name. And the last anyone heard, she was working in. Rodriguez met her eyes. She was working in institutional food services. Prison kitchens. The pieces slammed together in Sarah's mind with horrifying clarity. She ran. The drive back to Rikers was a blur of sirens and racing thoughts. If Emily Blackwood had infiltrated the prison system to avenge her father's destroyed career and the criminals who'd walked free, then this wasn't over. Williams, Santos, and Morrison might have been the primary targets, but they'd eaten from a batch that served 247 inmates. How many of those were connected to Judge Corrigan's corruption? Sarah's phone rang. A known number. Detective Chen? The voice was female, young, controlled. I assume by now you've figured it out. Emily Blackwood. That's not my name anymore. But yes. There was no emotion in her voice, just cold certainty. I want you to understand something, detective. My father spent 15 years putting monsters behind bars. Real monsters. People who destroyed lives, who preyed on the vulnerable, who corrupted everything they touched. And the system he believed in betrayed him. It let those monsters walk free and destroyed him for trying to expose the truth. So you poisoned them. I gave them justice. The justice they should have received in 2014. Williams, Santos, Morrison, they were just the beginning. Sarah's blood ran cold. How many others? 63 inmates are showing symptoms, detective. But only 15 will die. The others received a much smaller dose. Enough to make them very, very sick, but not fatal. You want to know which 15? Tell me. Every single one was released early or had charges mysteriously dropped between 2010 and 2015. Every single one should still be serving time. I've been working in these facilities for 3 years, building this list, waiting for the right moment. And last week, Judge Corrigan was confirmed for the Supreme Court nomination shortlist. Emily, listen to me. I'm done listening. My father listened. He played by the rules, trusted the system, and it destroyed him. Well, now the system gets to see what happens when someone breaks the rules with the same precision you use to protect your own. The line crackled. Check the kitchen, detective. My last shift ended an hour ago. But don't worry, I left you a present. The call ended. Sarah burst into the prison kitchen with Webb and a tactical team behind her. The space was empty, abandoned mid-shift when the lockdown began. Pots still sat on burners. Half-prepared meals congealed on prep stations. In the center of the main kitchen, on a stainless steel table, sat a laptop. Webb approached it carefully, checking for traps. It's clean. The screen was already on, showing a video file queued to play. Sarah hit the spacebar. The video showed a man in his 60s, gaunt and hollow-eyed, sitting in a dark room. Even after 4 years and obvious hardship, Sarah recognized Raymond Blackwood from the photos. My name is Raymond Blackwood, he said, his voice rough from disuse. If you're watching this, my daughter has begun to set things right. I want you to know she's doing this alone. I didn't ask for this. I don't condone it. But I understand it. He leaned closer to the camera. For 4 years, I've been in hiding, living in places where Corrigan's reach can't find me. She didn't just destroy my career, detective. She had me marked for death. I have proof, recordings, documents, evidence that the corruption goes higher than anyone imagined. Federal judges, senators, people who've built empires on the backs of the criminals they've protected. Blackwood's eyes burned with intensity. Emily knows where I am. She's known for 3 years. And she made me a promise. She wouldn't let them get away with it. I tried to stop her, but... His voice cracked. She's her father's daughter. Smash that subscribe button right now. Hit the bell icon because this rabbit hole goes deeper than you think. And drop a comment telling me if you'd survive what you're about to hear. Let's dive in.